There is an anti-Christian creed spreading in the culture. Now, in this time of crisis, more than ever. You've probably heard stories of the police being called by snooping neighbors on churches of all varieties holding illegal services that have been banned due to the current crisis, and Christian commentary that this is a time for penance being scorned and mocked by those in the culture who want to place a purely material cause for our problems, not thinking, or maybe not being willing, to accept the possibility of the work of the divine and the need to reject values this twisted society holds dear. Benedict XVI recently had thoughts of his on this growing sentiment of AntiChrist made available to the public, and Bishop Athanasius Schneider provided some commentary on those words as well. I have both for your consideration today. When quoting these prelates, I'll be using my usual terminology like medical Moloch worship and the James Martin agenda and the like for the normal reasons. Plus, at least the first is a more honest term, honestly, than is usually employed by the world anyway. Benedict's words come from his authorized biography entitled Benedict XVI, the Biography, which was written by Peter Seewald. It was published in Germany yesterday. The first volume of this 2-volume biography will be available in English in November, according to Amazon.com. The second volume will be published next year, and it is being reported that Benedict has some rather revealing thoughts on the state of the world, and on the scandal-racked church that is now unable to meaningfully resist this rising spirit of Antichrist. Here's the quote being circulated from Benedict on this issue. Speaking of the VatiLeaks scandal from 2012, which he denies is the reason he resigned the papacy, he then moves on to this spirit of Antichrist. Like I said, I sanitized this a bit to make our wonderful, benevolent, and totally fair hosts happy. Quote, of course, issues such as VatiLeaks are exasperating, and above all, incomprehensible and highly disturbing to people in the world at large. But the real threat to the Church, and thus to the ministry of St. Peter, consists not in these things, but in the worldwide dictatorship of seemingly humanistic ideologies. And to contradict them constitutes exclusion from the basic social consensus. He continued, 100 years ago, everyone would have thought it absurd to speak of James Martin marriages. Today, whoever opposes them is socially excommunicated. The same applies to medical Moloch worship and the production of human beings in the laboratory. Modern society is in the process of formulating an anti-Christian creed, and resisting it is punishable by social excommunication. The fear of this spiritual power of the Antichrist is therefore only too natural, and it truly takes the prayers of a whole diocese and the universal church to resist it. End quote. And what are these humanistic ideologies? Equality, fraternity, liberty. The rallying cry of the French Revolution, and the rallying cry of every liberal and every leftist revolution in history. We live in revolutionary times, and have since at least the French Revolution, unfortunately enabled by a ruler who had earlier been given instructions by our Lord to consecrate that country to his Sacred Heart, and he failed to do so. I'll have more on that story next week, but for now, it is sufficient to say that the account of the French and the state of the Church have many eerie parallels, one of which is the effect of the Revolution on both bodies. The state of France and the decimation of peoples has odd parallels to the state of the Church after the Revolution in it, with the exit of countless faithful, the loss of vocations, and the upheaval of society leaving the countless souls being lost. Our inability to fight these ideologies is not helped in the slightest by the presence of prelates who give so-called Catholic politicians who support these evil acts a pass in the public sphere. Despite their actions to enable the legalization of evil practices, earning them an automatic excommunication from the Church, and that is left unenforced by their bishops and the Church in general, to the point that it is laughable. We are all too often lectured about material evils, like economic inequality, the climate, the so-called need to let anyone into Western countries to live and work, often on the public dole at the same time, with no thought given to the common good of the peoples of those countries. And even we are told that we are obsessed with issues that Benedict directly called linked to the Antichrist. One has to wonder. But Bishop Schneider released a short statement on Benedict's words. I present them to you next, with the same sanitation as I did with Benedict XVI's. I thank Pope Benedict XVI for having raised this important topic, and I agree with his words concerning our current situation. The promotion and justification of medical Moloch worship and the James Martin agenda or the gender ideology contains in itself the spirit of a revolt against God, and in this sense it reveals to have the characteristic of the AntiChrist. The advocates against medical Moloch worship and the James Martin agenda say that God's prohibition of murdering innocent human beings, as in the case of Moloch worship, is wrong, is evil. And likewise they say that the creation of the two biological sexes is evil, and that the contrary of it is good, i.e., the abolition of the distinction of the biological sexes is good. So the ideology of the medical practice and the James Martin agenda reveals to be a revolt against God, and thus have the characteristics of the Antichrist. The systematic promotion of the medical practice and the James Martin agenda, or the gender ideology on a worldwide scale, is an indication of the operation of a kind of hidden one-world government, which in its ideological program is essentially atheistic, anti-Christian, and even blasphemous, because of the revolt against the created order of God. The Antichrist is not only the one who denies the order of salvation, i.e., the truth of the divine incarnation, the truth that Christ, the Son of God, truly incarnated, but also who denies the order of creation, and concretely the order of the two biological sexes and of the absolute prohibition of killing of innocent human beings. The killing of innocent people in the womb of their mothers and the turning upside down the created order of the two biological sexes and of marriage and family is an expression of the attitude of the Antichrist, an attitude which is called in the Bible also revolt and apostasy. And the Antichrist is also called the man of iniquity and the son of perdition, the adversary and the opposer of God and of the order God created in the level of nature and of redemption. The most characteristic attitude of the Antichrist is to put himself in the place of God. And this occurs in the case of abortion, where man is in practice declaring himself as a kind of God, by declaring to have an unlimited right over human life and over the order of human sexuality. Therefore, the practice and ideology of this medical practice and of the James Martin agenda have true signs of the spirit of Antichrist. There you have it. The list of prelates willing to speak honestly about these issues is breathtakingly short. The worst part about this is that the same prelates unwilling to stand up for what is right are the same ones following the lead of the same political system enabling this culture of Antichrist, by continuing the ban of the Mass publicly well into the future. My old home state of Oregon just announced it is not reopening the free movement of the public until July at the earliest, and most likely the bishops will go along with it, making it nearly 4 full months without the Mass and most of the sacraments for the bulk of the Catholics in that state. The spirit of Antichrist is in ascension, and it is evident not only in those evils mentioned by Schneider and Benedict, but in the news that in New York, Christian-based charities that are working to aid in the current crisis relief are making local members of the James Martin Brigade uncomfortable, leading the Christian charity groups that are doing that work to leave New York. Yes, the sensibilities of the damaged are more important than aiding and helping in relief of the current crisis that is hitting New York especially hard. That tells you everything you need to know about the state of the world. We have gone mad, with the diabolic disorientation in the Church now in the society writ large. Only God knows what is coming next. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. I, for one, am thankful that we still have some decent prelates willing to speak publicly on the state of the Church and of the world. Keep praying for the Church. Thanks for listening. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.